Hello guys, this is NJ from the MBTI tier lists. In today's episode, I'm just gonna go and have like a rant about ENTJs, okay? And I'm gonna be making other videos like where I'm ranting about other types. You know, like every type in the system has something to rant about. And ENTJs, I mean, they might just be the best guy to rant about, in my view. So, like, if you're an ENTJ and you become insulted, that's okay, you know. You probably deserve it, you know, and but just like to remember that like ENTJs, they do also have some, you know, good sides to them and some, you know, great things. This is gonna be like a really black and white, you know, rant, and so it's not like really realistic. ENTJs are much better than this, and so on. And you know, I like, you know, you could have like many rants about types and ENTJs especially. So the one thing that I'm gonna be talking about is how ENTJs that they see everything like all circumstances as kind of like a Game of Thrones, like as kind of like a chess game where they want to win and they want to conquer and dominate. And you know, like to me it has always been frustrating. You know, like most of the types in the system have some kind of a game going on. Like many types kind of like enforce a certain kind of a circumstance on the people around them. Like ENFJs, for example, they're always like looking at everybody and kind of like looking like whether some person's behavior is living up to the standards of common courtesies and being polite and compassionate and taking everybody else into consideration and so on. Like ENTPs, for example, they tend to debate everybody. You know, ENTPs basically enforce the whole idea that like you're supposed to be logical, like on everybody's ass. And ENTPs can even get frustrated and pissed if somebody doesn't like argument themselves and so on. So, you know, like different types have their own kind of quirk. They have their own kind of like dimension, you know, which is, of course, like traces itself back to the functional stacking of that given type, you know. And people kind of like they try to kind of like they're looking at the circumstance from that perspective and they're like assessing everybody's behavior from that perspective and so on. So what is the ENTJ like? What does the ENTJ enforce on everybody? That's Game of Thrones, man. That is like competition. That is like who's gonna win, who's gonna be stronger, who's gonna be weaker, who's who. Like ENTJs are all about like pecking orders and power dynamics. I always say that like extroverted thinking is kind of like the pecking order function. Like TE users tend to look down on people who are weaker than them, and they like to look at like who's who and like who has the cards in their hands. And they have very little respect for people who don't have the cards in their hands or people who are like playing those cards, you know, like in like an unstrategic way. TE users, like TE is kind of like the competence function and it's competitive and it's like it assesses everybody else's behavior based on the question of like how competent was this choice, like given the circumstance. And then extroverted sensing, on the other hand, I feel that like one of the things that it does is that it's assessing like power dynamics. Like people with extroverted sensing tend to be really good at like positioning themselves in a room like in a way that would be beneficial for them, like from a power struggle standpoint. And they tend to have this like physical presence and so on. It's just like, people who actually use SE, like, ESFPs and ESTPs and ISFPs and ISTPs, they can do it in a smooth way. I mean, like ESFPs and ESTPs, they will end up muscling you. That they're hyper aware of these, like, physical and environment power dynamics. They're really good at like assessing who's weak and who's strong and looking at what is the strong and weak point of everything. ENTJs, they have like extroverted sensing as a tertiary function, so it is a bit like undeveloped, but they're still using it. And in many cases, this results in ENTJs kind of like, kind of like muscling people in almost like an immature way, that they're kind of clumsy with it, so to speak. Like when you're being muscled by an ESTP, it's like, yeah, like you're being muscled, but it's almost like the guy is doing it in a really smooth way. You don't even notice that it's happening before it's too late. And it's not like, it's not clumsy. It's not like untactful. It's like, it's in some ways like, okay, yeah, sure. But with ENTJs, there's always this feeling that like, no, this guy was like being a dick. He's like an asshole. And ENTJs, they almost like can't resist the urge to muscle people. And I like that is the combination of the TE and SE. Like pecking orders plus power dynamics. That's like a super like an asshole combo, to be honest. Like you're looking at everything from the standpoint of power dynamics and who's who and like who's going to be victorious and so on. So it's like, this is like how ENTJs perceive every single circumstance. It is actually hard for an ENTJ to like look at everything beyond these things. And yeah, like, hey, if you're playing an actual chess game, if you are competing in a competition, then yay, okay. But the problem that I see with ENTJs is that like they can't even switch it off. ENTJs, when an ENTJ walks into the room, it's like all of a sudden, like we're all in a competition. And it's like, hey, most of the people don't give a fuck about Game of Thrones. Most of the people don't think about the whole thing. Like most of the people are just like hanging around. But when an ENTJ enters the room, then all of a sudden, like everything that you do is being assessed from this angle from now on. And it's super like annoying and frustrating. Or like when I hang around, like I'm a lazy guy, I'm a hazardous guy. Most of the time, I don't give a fuck about being competent in anything. It's a very rare thing that I ever like bother actually trying to be successful or something. And it feels unfair when an ENTJ is looking at you, because whatever little mistake that you make, it's like it's a proof that you're like a beta and you're like a weak, pathetic shit. And it's like, bro, like I wasn't even trying. Like I don't think like that. Like you're thinking like that. Like why are you like enforcing this kind of fucking angle out of my fucking life? I got better things to do. And when it comes to the other people's games, like the FE, like, politeness rules and common courtesies, ENTPs debating you. Like this is something that can be a little bit annoying every now and then. But they don't like really have like the ramifications of those games are not that meaningful. You can kind of like ignore it and move on with your life. And it's like be minding your own business. With ENTJs, it's kind of like the same thing if some guy would just come and try to beat you up. And it's like what if you don't want to fight? What if you're not interested in fighting? It's like you still have to fight because the guy is trying to punch you in the face. That's like an ENTJ in a room. That is like an ENTJ's mind. And it is super frustrating. Like the Game of Thrones, power dynamics pecking orders game is kind of like, that's kind of like the worst game like in the entire system. And that is because it kind of like forces everybody to compete and everybody to like, demonstrate their competence and all kinds of bullshits. In 99% of the circumstances in the world, you don't do fuck with competence. If you're hanging around in the cafeteria, you're hanging around with your fucking friends, you're fucking like, even being at the office at work, in most of the jobs and works and everything, like, and so on, you probably get away with just like doing the mandatory, like as long as you're doing your job on a functional level and so on. In school, like, yeah, like you don't have to get like straight A's or anything and so on. I'm not saying like ENTJs would always like get straight A's or anything, but like I'm trying to like explain this, what ENTJs do to other people, which is like this like endless assessment of everybody's power levels and competence levels. That's like a douchey thing to do. That is like, like you're basically skipping the human part, and it's like enforcing this like super brutal and merciless, picture to people's lives, and you're just being a dick. And the other thing that frustrates me about this is the fact that like most of the people do not wake up in the morning thinking about like how they're gonna dominate and be successful and be even more competent and show everybody and be like who's who. Like ENTJs will put you into a circumstance of like who's who. And they do it like regularly. They're almost like challenging every other guy that they meet at the cafeteria or something. And it's just like, it's fucking nonsense. But the biggest thing that frustrates me about ENTJs is that they don't seem to realize that most of the fucking people don't give a fuck about their like, power hungry bullshits. And when you start thinking about like if every single person on this planet would wake up in the morning and do nothing else but try to beat everybody else and be super competent and win every circumstance and show no weakness and be a dick at the office, like the ENTJ would die in the first fucking day. Like sometimes I feel that like ENTJs are only successful because they're the only person who bothers to try. Like most of the people don't give a shit, and that's why they probably are not always like the strongest in every single circumstance in their fucking lives. For most of the people, it simply doesn't mean like enough to bother. Okay. Now the douchiest thing about ENTJs is that like they seem to somehow mistake the fact that nobody else is in the game, and then them winning the game because nobody else bothered as somehow like a sign that they're more competent and better than everybody else. ENTJs are the guy who will punch you in the face, and if you don't punch them back, they think that you're a bad fighter, and they think that they're the greatest, that they can beat anybody, then, and so on. Like when in reality, it's not like an achievement to win a tournament that nobody else attended, But when an ENTJ walks into a room, they're basically like putting everybody into a tournament where nobody wants to be, except the ENTJ. And then they go and win the tournament. And then they think that they're the greatest and the most competent and all bullshits. Okay? My favorite type in the system, like when it comes to ENTJs, is the ESTP. Who I think that like in most of the competitions that you could put an ENTJ and an ESTP in, the ESTP would probably like be beating the shit out of the ENTJ. I like ENTJs. They're actually like secretly bitter about the fact that they have a tertiary SE and they know that an ESTP would just like beat the fucking dicks out of them in war, business, sports. Like with people, like ESTPs have insane people skills. They can talk their way through anything and so on. They can manipulate people while beating your fucking ass, while muscling everybody, and so on. ENTJs are all fucking gangster until an ESTP walks into the room, and then they start doubting themselves. And they start realizing, like, okay, man, and so on. So, yeah, but it is super frustrating. Here's the thing, like, I'm not sure if I have ever seen, like, an ENTJ who was, like, super more, like, successful than anybody else. But the ENTJ is the only guy who, like, didn't think about anything else in their entire fucking lives. So it's just like ENTJs, they think that they're greater than what they really are, and they don't understand that, like, most of the people were not even trained. And in most of the cases, if I have ever actually, like, had to compete with an ENTJ, like, I for example have been able to, like, at the least, like, hold my own. And it frustrates me that, like, ENTJs will like put you into that circumstance. That like why the fuck would I have to prove anything to anybody? Like, I'm not interested about that kind of shit. Like, like, why would I have to, like, compete with some dick ENTJ all of a sudden? Like, why would I have to bother, man? Like why couldn't I just fucking hang around? But it's like ENTJs, they will look down on people who don't join the tournament, Because ENTJs, like, they perceive everything as a weakness. They will see you as a pathetic shit, like, if you don't want to fight, like, if you don't want to compete. And that's also something that, like, pisses me off. So the other thing that I have seen with many ENTJs, whether it's in the media or in real life and, like, everywhere, like, whether it's, like, fictional set actors or real people, or, like, celebrities talking about their lives, or, like, super successful ENTJs, like, talking about their lives, like, in an interview or something. ENTJs, they have this, like, weird kind of, like, desire to take stuff from others. They almost, like, want what others have. They have this, like, weird, like, almost like a fetish of, like, wanting to hijack somebody else's shit. It's almost like ENTJs don't, like, really have, like, a moral principle when it comes to, like, ownership. Like, ENTJs are, like, the most unholy type in the entire system. They literally, like, if they see a super successful guy running a super successful business, it's not that they're being, like, amazed of, like, wow, that's, like, a competent guy, and that is so awesome. That's more like, no, I want what that guy has. And we like and of course, like, maybe some guy can produce this kind of a desire. Like, it's completely alien to me personally. I like many SE users are like that they want what somebody else has. But with ENTJs, it goes, like, one step further. With ENTJs, it's not only that they want what that guy has, but it's like they want that guy's shit. Like most of the, like, people who think like this, they might go, like, that guy is rich, so I want to be rich. That guy has a beautiful wife, so I want to have a beautiful wife. And ENTJ will go, like, no, I'm going to fuck that guy's wife, and then I'm going to take his company, and that's like an ENTJ. ENTJs literally want to they want to steal your shit from you and make it their own. They're not there to, like, make something for themselves. They are there to hijack your shit for them. ENTJs, they hijack organizations, they hijack companies, women, female ENTJs, maybe they hijack men. ENTJs are like, they're like the secret, they're always like, having their own little kind of like secret society going on where they're, like, plotting to overtake stuff. Organizations and people and resources and everything. And it's like, many times when you see an ENTJ, they're not, like, really building anything kind of like from scratch for themselves. It's more like an ENTJ's plan many times. It's just like, no, I'm gonna gain the resources by taking somebody else's resources. ENTJs rarely get their own resources. Most of the ENTJs, it's like a really weird thing to me. It's like a really unholy thing. And many times ENTJs are even super open about it. I remember like interview with Schwarzenegger one time, who I believe to be a clear ENTJ guy. You know, everything about the guy screams ENTJ when he's talking and explaining how he thinks and goes about his way and so on. In one interview, Schwarzenegger, the actor who became a senator and like the governor of like LA or something and so on, like California, whatever. Like, I'm not from America, but anyways, like in one interview, he literally said that when he had like there was some guy who had been helping him out when he was like a bodybuilder, and he had like I can't remember, he had some like company and all kinds of shits. And Schwarzenegger had simply one time like told him to his face that, yeah, like one day I'm just gonna take all of this from you, and then laughed. Okay, now, yeah, it was kind of like a joke. It actually wasn't a joke, maybe the guy was old, maybe he was retiring, maybe it was somehow a feasible idea that like one time he would have like a successor or something. But that's the thing about the ENTJs. For them, it's not like being a successor. It's like, no, I'm just going to take what you have, and that's going to be mine. And they can even laugh about it, The other example, and they were like, I have seen dozens of these examples where an ENTJ will just like literally say it out loud that there's going to go, and like they will tell to your face that like 5 years from now, I'm going to have your company, I'm going to be fucking your wife, and all of your money will be mine, and all of your resources will be mine. ENTJs will just fucking say that shit to your face. ENTJs are an insanely unholy person. And the funny thing is that like ENTJs many times just get assassinated. They were like Julius Caesar, Napoleon, all of these guys, like, and that is simply because like ENTJs, they don't have a morality over like walking over people, dominating others, conquering people, but also like ENTJs have no morality when it comes to even their like own folk, so to speak. They will just like take shit. They will hijack shit. And that leads into a circumstance where at some point all of the big players and all of the powerful people will just go like, no, fuck this guy. He's like an unholy person. Like even immoral people will go like, no, this guy's just like playing along. Let's just like kill him or something. Another quote from an ENTJ, Genghis Khan. He said something like that there is no greater pleasure than, living in, like, I can't remember the exact quote, but it was something along the lines that, like, there's no greater pleasure than riding somebody else's horse, living in his castle and then fucking his wife, and it is, like, literally what Genghis Khan said, and this is, like, this is how ENTJs think. They somehow, like, they have, like, brain damage when it comes to like respecting somebody's ownership or privacy or like, and ENTJs, they're never like grateful. Like if you give them something, they think you're being a weak shit. ENTJs will just see it as like if an ENTJ wants your company, for example, and you get them into a higher position, they're not like happy that they're not like, oh my God, like I'm so grateful that you gave me this opportunity and, raise in salary and more responsibilities I've been dreaming about. And I can tell you right now, I'm going to be your man. I'm going to be loyal forever. And I owe you my life. And I'm so happy and grateful. You're just like a good guy, man. ENTJs, they will look at you and be like, that dumb shit. He just got me like one step closer to me, elbowing him aside and taking his company from him, and so on. So like, and it is super weird how like ENTJs can like do this thing out in the open and be even like honest about it. It's almost like so like from the left field that when an ENTJ goes and says something like that's almost like so fucking sociopathic that it's almost like nobody takes it seriously, It is so blatant, it is so unquestionably fucking insane that you don't even almost like know what to make of it, so to speak. And so on. It's like a really weird thing, and like I'm not sure if ENTJs like understand how like other people have respect for other people, like nobody else thinks like this. And I'm not sure if ENTJs like have like an awareness of just like how fucking unholy is it to think like this, So it's problematic to hire an ENTJ because ENTJs are never happy working for anybody. They're basically always plotting and scheming for a secret revolution or mutiny or something. And they just like want more stuff for themselves. They want to conquer and dominate. The ENTJs are not happy unless they are the man. And they're willing to like take from others to be the man. And once again, like I like part of the reason why ENTJs tend to be so successful is because they're the only people who thinks like this. Most of the people have some principles, and it has been studied that like narcissists and sociopaths tend to be more successful than others, and they're more capable of rising the ranks in organizations and everything because they're willing to do all the stuff that nobody else is willing to do. If you have no principles, like no moral principles, like of course you're going to be winning the competition, and I'm not saying that the ENTJs that they would all be narcissists and sociopaths. I'm saying that they're like the closest to a narcissist that you can get with MBTI, and certain things that they think and are willing to do are just plain narcissistic. And it's like normal for an ENTJ to think like that. They're super scary, at the very least to me, and so on. Like I always hope that there would be some like fucking ESTP mob boss, who was like fuck the ENTJ over when ENTJs are going like this. Like I don't want to get into war with anybody myself, and so on. But it's like I like ENTJs basically deserve to be assassinated. Like at some point they're like megalomaniac, unholy desire to just fucking hijack other people's shit. It can go too far, and so on. So it's like, yeah. Now, of course, like, yeah, I have known ENTJs who have moral backbone and so on. But even the most morally backboned ENTJs that I have met, they still have these qualities. They still think like this, and even if they wouldn't like be willing to kill anybody or actually like steal from somebody illegally or something, they might like offhand still be like plotting how to become the CEO of a company and how to fucking like at the very least like slightly elbow the idiot aside who's running the show at the moment. And that kind of shit. And they're still looking down on you if you're not like super competent under all circumstance and handle yourself like a real man, and so on. And that is also so fucking annoying. Like the other thing that is annoying about ENTJs is how they never reveal anything unglamorous or strategically bad about themselves. This is the other thing. Like most of the people are willing to admit to their mistakes and laugh at their own unglamorousness and so on. Yeah, ENTJs can do it if it's something that doesn't like bear any strategic, meaning. But once again, like if you're the only guy who doesn't admit to their mistakes, who doesn't see anything, who never quote unquote like gives it to anybody, like yeah, it's not that hard to win, like but that's like who are you as a person, man? Like I'm the kind of a guy, for example, if somebody asks me a question, like I'm super honest about my shortcomings. I like you will get like a list, like a long list of like here's my faults, here's where I suck, this is where I failed, and so on and so on. And so on, ENTJs, they're acting like they don't have a fucking weakness. And sometimes, that they have weaknesses and shortcomings and so on, and an ENTJ will never admit that shit. And it is so annoying. Especially when you know that like ENTJs, the reason why ENTJs don't admit to shit is because that would like make them lose the game. That they don't want to give an inch of an advantage to anybody under any circumstance. And it's like pisses you off, man. Once again, like, why does life have to be such fucking Game of Thrones for ENTJs? Why not just be friends? Why not just be like, whatever the fuck? You know, it is annoying. And then once again, like if everybody else started like hiding themselves and playing like, ENTJs, they play this game of like intelligence agency when it comes to info on everybody and themselves, where the ENTJ reveals nothing of themselves and they're always trying to fish and milk intel on everybody else. And so once again, like if everybody was behaving like this, like would the ENTJ be so successful if nobody told them shits and everybody was playing every single circumstance like as powerfully as you could, not giving a fuck about anybody and so on. And it's just like, no, this would be just like be a sociopathic world. People wouldn't be human beings. They would all be fucking narcissists and sociopaths. And it's just like ENTJs, they're like the one fucking sociopath among normal people. And it is so annoying, man. Yeah, so that's my rant on ENTJs. I could probably go for like hours or something, but like I'm gonna quit and yeah, I'm gonna have a rant on every other type. So don't worry. Like I'm not saying like ENTJs are the. I think that they're kind of like the worst, okay, of the whole system. Like I personally think that they're the biggest douchebags. Don't get me wrong, but every type has something to be ranting about, and this was my rant on ENTJs. Maybe I will make another one. I think that I could have like many rants on many types, and so on. But like this was the angle this time, and yeah, that was a rant, guys. So see you around, okay? Bye bye.